Oh, Seven Citizens, Black here from CAsaBLACk Gaming, and today we have tons to discuss with the most recent roadmap, which was released yesterday on April 19th, and even though the advertised changes were pretty cool and all, which I'll touch on in a moment, it's all of their other changes that really bring things into focus more, and we had a lot of deliverables pushed out, so you need to get ready for quite a few delays on items that we hoped might make it into 320, which now appear more likely for either a 321 patch or even further into a 4.0 patch, just depending on how server meshing comes along and when they push it. Now before we get into that, I want to ask that if you like my reviews, ship loadouts, and these roadmap deep dives, that you go ahead and subscribe to my channel as we're trying to close in on 10,000 subs for the year, and also go ahead and like the video and comment on which of these items you're looking forward to the most. And so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get to this deep dive. So first up are the new items added to the progress tracker. We've got Headhunter Faction Outfits, which is a variant Pyro gang, so this will help fill out the Pyro system, which after so many interactions with the Ninetales, I think we're all ready to see some different folks, and thus different loot as well. We are also getting the Rough and Ready Pyro gang, and so with all of these new gangs, it will be interesting to see if they also get special ship colors or outpost variants, so we know who we're dealing with on site. We also have 3 new mission types: Mining Resource Rush, which sounds like a great mining org opportunity, and gameplay, as players are tasked with going out to an asteroid to do some spatial mining until the resources are depleted, and which can also be attacked by pirates. Some might not like that more group stuff is coming for salvaging and mining, but I think it's high time that group activity is further pushed. The other 2 missions are also aimed more at multiplayer, which is a package extraction mission where teams will work together to recover stolen prototype ship components before they can escape off-world, which means there will be a timed element to these missions, which is just awesome, and with it happening on Crusader, the lore of the area and ship manufacturer all works to making this sound perfect. The last mission is a Mission Impossible sounding feature where players are tasked with infiltrating ships defended by hostile NPCs, and we will finally be hacking terminals, and this can be both lawful and unlawful mission types. Now the only way this could be even better is if you had to have a Herald or Star Runner ship on your team to make the mission give out a bonus, so like with these missions you could get that info fast and then be off with the team aboard the ships that does the heavy lifting, and once the ship is cleared they could hack the terminal and the data would be sent over to the ships that are waiting outside instead of you having to manually carry it to a ship. Now I honestly doubt we'll see this in a first pass, but it would still be cool and give these poor ship owners a solid use for these ships, and I guess we'll see how it goes. Alright, now moving on to the real meat of this video, all of the changes to what was already on the roadmap. Alright, so the schedule was updated more for the downstream teams whose time is scheduled more for the current or upcoming quarter versus the upstream team who are more of the project starters and whose work the downstream team needs to happen first before they can jump in. So this gives us an idea of where the focus is, and we can get some ideas on things that we might actually see coming sooner for 320 and afterward. Again, things can always change, and all I can do here is offer up guesswork, which I'll try to keep these expectations in check. Now as I track these changes, it's becoming easier to make more educated guesses, but of course I'm still only guessing since none of the inside folks at CIG are returning my calls or texts. Now first up, artificial gravity was actually moved up by a month from the end of September to the end of August. Now this feature is more in line with a suite of deliverables all involving the resource management system, or engineering gameplay as it's called. Now it was hinted at in an Inside Star Citizen in February, or I think March, that engineering gameplay is being heavily focused on, and we'll see it sooner than we might think. So I think it's possible we could get this in a 3rd quarter patch around September or October if we're seeing something similar on the roadmap with the other features this deals with, such as life support on ships and fire, etc. Bounty Hunter version 2 was pushed back almost 2 months from the beginning of July to the end of August. We're starting to finally see work from Inside Star Citizen on the new jails and bounty drop-offs, so I think this is something else that can come along before Pyro, especially since the first planetary jail will be on Hurston as shown here. So this is definitely something being worked on, and hopefully we'll see more gray box progress this quarter on the buildings, and maybe even get some live capture footage as well. More cave archetypes are coming, but they were pushed out 2 weeks from the middle of April until the end of April, but I will be interested to see more of these. But more importantly, hopefully some missions heading out to the ones that we've already have are possibly coming in 319. Speaking of going out to points of interest, more work was added back to the roadmap for derelict outposts, with that work ending in May. There had been nothing going on with this deliverable for a few months, so I'm thinking there were just some minor tweaks or additions that were added and nothing major here. The Duster faction outfits have actually been on the roadmap since February 22nd, but had shown the initial work done in March, and that work is now scheduled to end in mid-June. This is an old Stanton gang, but maybe they have ties to Pyro, or will help us set our introduction into Pyro, and they could be something else entirely different, or we might just get more than the 2 mission types for them that we currently have, and we'll actually get to see them. Guess we'll have to wait and see how this goes. Fire hazards, which shown its initial work being done the first week of March, has now been added with more time going into mid-June. Will this be the final bit to get better fire or controllable fire in game, to where fire extinguishers or depleting oxygen in a room is part of engineering gameplay to make its way into the game? I guess we'll have to see, but I think we're seeing a trend here. FPS device tier 1 is something that more work would be added to it from its original finished time frame of the first week of March. This is looking like the downstream team work being added, and it is scheduled to be complete by the end of this month, so we might see some new FPS device functionality or new devices developed from this, or maybe we'll finally get that fire extinguisher we just talked about. Alright, now I'm not gonna lie, this one kind of hurt. Freight elevators were moved out yet again, this time from the end of March to mid-September. Now these elevators, which will help with unloading freight at stations and planets, has now been pushed back further out, making this unlikely until well after 320. I think some of the priorities have been shifted due to revealing issues with 318, and so these are a casualty of that, which is kind of fine, I guess. We need the things that are in the game to work, and offloading ships, while important, is not something we're waiting on, since our cargo can currently be magically transported off. What we do need them to focus on though still are the ship tractor beams, so let's see later if this will actually be impacted. Frontier clothing had more work added from its initial March ending time to now mid-June. These are new NPC and player outfits for that frontier living lifestyle. This will most likely allow for us to visit NPC mission givers on planets, or to see missions involving NPCs out on moons or faraway places. We might not see much of this until Pyro, but it could also make its way into Stanton, so I guess we'll see. Hacking Tier 0 had work added, but the good news is that its work only goes until mid-June, and with today's announcement of the new hacking missions being worked on, we can pretty much bet that we should see this finally implemented into, I'd say, 320. I feel safe in saying that because the missions team has really been on their game, puns, right? And for those missions to be added with the times you will see in a bit, I think this is finally happening. Now, the Headhunters faction outfits, which were announced today in this update, were also added to the roadmap, with its initial work being scheduled to be done in mid-June. This should only be the upstream team, so I would expect more work to be added later this year. After this, and since it's for Pyro, there's no worries for time here. Now, here's where my thoughts on engineering seems to be paying off, as we're seeing yet another piece of that engineering puzzle being shown some light on it, with life support tier 0 being moved up from the last week in September to mid-August. I think it's safe to say that this means engineering is quite on track to be either heavily shown off for CitizenCon for a 4th quarter release, or possibly even a 3rd quarter release. Now, I would bank on the 4th quarter release or with Pyro, but 3rd quarter is not out of the window here. Just unlikely, I think. Still, it's good to see this progress being done and the time frame being bumped up instead of down. Now, oddly enough, you would think that with Hacking Tier 0 coming soon, that lockable containers would also be coming sooner, as they have sort of been in orbit of one another, but it has disappeared from the roadmap altogether after being pushed back to the last week of September a couple of weeks back. So this early first hacking we get with these specialized mission types might be all that we get with this until these containers find themselves back on the roadmap, because I was really hoping we would get to hack random containers for better loot or mission objectives that were solo based. The map and radar system looked to be complete during the last week of March, but more work was added, showing it now ends the final week of April. Might we be getting closer to finally having a better star map and radar? My guess is no sooner than 320, but this might be something we don't see along with the new quantum jump look and overall UI changes until 4th quarter, but it's so long overdue at this point that we really need to get this in game. The MFD rework for ships has been pushed back from the 3rd week of June to the 1st week of August. Now, not a huge surprise here, but still something we're long looking forward to. The Mission Manager app is back on the roadmap after not being on it since at least last fall. This feature will bring building blocks, the upgraded UI that we see on things like elevators and the sales terminals that look spectacular, and will bring that same look to the mission screens, allowing for more shared info like reputation requirements for missions and overall just more dynamic info for these missions, which is a huge complaint right now that some people just don't get the information that they feel like they need. This work is scheduled to go until the 3rd week of August. Now, I would expect this no earlier than the last quarter of the year, with this perhaps making that patch a giant UI upgrade, as things seem to be trending toward that time frame to have multiple visual improvements added to the game, and they all kind of seem connected. Now, yet another visual UI improvement, the mobiGlass rework, which had initial work completed the 2nd week of March, is now showing work being done through the 1st week of July. We're all dying for this new work to be in game since it was shown off last year at CitizenCon, and something else I'm guessing will be ready for that 4th quarter patch at the earliest. Now, the most anticipated feature coming in 2023, the Mop and Bucket, which for as long as I've been tracking it was set to end the last of May, is now scheduled to end 2 to 3 weeks earlier, so who says we don't get things faster than anticipated? This feature will now be complete in early May, and I predict we will see this awesome new feature in 3.20, which will set the game on fire. The new missions data download, which was added to the roadmap this week as discussed in the last section, has an end date of the end of June. Now, we might get this in time for 3.20, as I have seen other content creators seeming to predict, and I kind of agree here. Looking forward to this. The new missions mining resource rush was also added to the roadmap with an end date of the end of June. Now, I don't know what all will go into this mission type and if it will truly be ready in time for a 3.20 patch, but we should get some clues on this with the next quarter of Inside Star Citizens, so we'll see how those go before I make any bold predictions on this. The last new missions package, Extraction, was added along with the others and is set to finish up its first bit of work in mid-June. Now, we know little about this new mission type except that since it deals with Crusader, we might see this as part of the new hinted at platforms that are coming around the huge gas giant. We will know more hopefully after this week's Star Citizen Live with the missions team. Another piece of news about new missions is the Salvage Contracts mission, which was a newer one that was being worked on but is now somehow missing off the deliverables roadmap. As of the last roadmap update, it was there and showing a completed date of the 3rd week of September. Now, we are getting some salvage contracts for 3.19 that are confirmed, so perhaps that extra work on the roadmap was an error, but regardless, the items usually still hang out on the deliverables roadmap, so not quite sure what's going on here, so we'll see if it pops back up later. Persistent Habs, which is, as of the last roadmap update, had shown its work being done all the way through September, is now showing that work ending in mid-May. Now, before anyone gets excited here, what I think we're seeing is a shuffle in terms of teams here, where engineering or other priorities are being moved around for the following summer months. With building interiors being worked on, I definitely think we'll see Persistent Habs come back after May, so we'll just keep an eye out. So this next bit of news can be read in entirely varying ways. On the one hand, Persistent Server Meshing has changed its date from the 3rd week of September all the way back to mid-June. Now, what I think is happening here is that maybe initial upstream team work is complete and they need the downstream team to jump in, so I think we might be seeing some of that, and we'll then pick back up with the upstream team again later this summer or fall. We don't know if that's the case, but I can promise you that this does not mean anything more than some teams shuffling around, and not that we're getting server meshing anytime soon. Physical damage and breakability is back on the roadmap after briefly being sitting there dead for a few months now. I think this is probably just some further work on salvaging ships that has come up as the need has arisen with so many of the changes that have been happening as a result of players finally getting into the verse and playing. This is only some brief work and could also be related to vehicle munching, which we'll see later in this deep dive. Physics Rope Simulation is back with some more work scheduled through the 2nd week of June. Now, this is not a major feature and will probably just be part of some future gameplay mechanics involving ropes and pulleys. Another ghost from the past has popped up, Player Interaction Experience T2 Visor HUD and Helmet, that has work added going through mid-July. Might this be additional work for things with the mobiGlass and new star map, or maybe even ground FPS? Let's hope. Pyro System Planet and Mission Setup has had its work pushed out from when it ended at the end of March until the 1st week of September, and this will likely just keep being constantly pushed out and fleshed out more with Pyro coming next year. Oh yeah, there was another factional outfit added to the roadmap, the Rough and Ready faction outfits, and that work is scheduled so far to end in mid-June. Will they truly be rough and ready? Well, if their implication is anything to go by, I'd say yes. Now for another letdown, whereas we had hoped vehicle munching might be here for 320, we can safely put that dream in the bin because work was added from it sitting as completed in March and is now extended through the end of September. I had hoped that since it was not moved when we got the initial September bumps for many of the other items a few weeks back, that munching was in a good state to be done this summer. It simply is not, so it's a huge bummer for those hoping that we might get some additional salvaging function a lot sooner. Security Network version 1 is now showing its work being completed in August, moving up from September. This feature helps give players clearance levels for certain areas or through specific doors, so this could tie into things like the new jail and bounty hunter improvements coming, and with the timing similar to those, it seems kind of likely. It could be pushed back again, so we'll just have to watch it. The Subsumption Editor integration tool is back on the roadmap after missing for a few months and is scheduled to end its work on the second week of July. I know this helps with missions, so maybe either some fixes or improvements, so we'll see if the new date sticks or if we hear anything about it, or possibly some enhanced features. Alright, now unannounced vehicles is something I monitor very closely, and the last couple of months have had some additions and removals and some items move about, and while it's kind of impossible to say for sure, the one thing I can do is say with a bit of confidence that we have 3 vehicles that we might see either all in Invictus or perhaps 2 for Invictus and 1 for Alien Week, but I honestly guess all 3 are for Invictus. It looks like we can expect 2 concepts, as since 2 of those 3 have only had the vehicle concept team doing work on them. The third though is something that has been in the works since August of last year, which means only 8 months of work, so this seems more like a variant ship because any larger ship will take a lot more time to have work on it, or it could be a brand new ground vehicle, which seems possible as well. Now as for me, I'm holding out hope for a medical ground variant or an all new ground medical evac vehicle, but we'll have to see. There had been a ship I was tracking that began in early 2022 that was originally scheduled to be done in May as well, which to me said it was a medium or large size ship that might come out as a direct to flyable, but that ship has now been pushed out to August as a complete date, so I think this could be a direct to flyable for CitizenCon instead, so we'll keep an eye on that. Okie dokie, and so that's going to do it for this roadmap deep dive. Now, quite a bit of interesting switch ups, and I think the takeaway here is that we're seeing some things come into focus for 320 and further, and where the emphasis will be at. Vehicle tractor beams are still scheduled for mid-June, so fingers crossed that we can at least get the Argo SRV into the game, as it looks about finished anyway, and the need for some towing is very great right now. Even if the remainder of vehicle tractor beams for moving containers is maybe not quite ready, we at least need our little tugboat savior in the verse with all of the junk that we're encountering. Anyway, let me know which items you are disappointed or excited about, and remember to be kind to your fellow gamer, keep those great expectations in check, and stay positive citizens.